Story 1, the wrong house on Delmar Street. So this happened about 3 years ago, and I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. I was doing DoorDash at the time. Nothing glamorous. I was between jobs, rent was due, and it was the kind of thing where you just grab your car keys and tell yourself it's temporary. I've been doing it for maybe 6 weeks at that point, so I wasn't exactly a veteran, but I knew my way around the app well enough. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:20 p.m. I remember because I kept checking the time, trying to decide if I was going to squeeze in one more order after this one or just go home and eat whatever was in my fridge. The order was simple, one bag, Thai food, prepaid, no special instructions. The drop-off was listed as 414 Teen Delmar Street. Here's where it gets annoying before it gets anything else. Delmar Street in my city is a mess. There's Delmar Street, Delmar Avenue, and Delmar Court, all within about a mile of each other, and the app doesn't always specify. I'd gotten it wrong once before and had to eat the cost of a red delivery fee, so I was being careful. I typed it into Google Maps manually, confirmed it, and headed out. The neighborhood was quiet. Older houses, most of them dark, the kind of street where the streetlights are spaced too far apart and there's always at least one with a flicker. I pulled up to 414 and double-checked the address on the bag, double-checked the app. Everything matched. I grabbed the food, walked up the porch steps, and knocked. Standard 3 knocks. Waited. Nothing. I knocked again, a little harder this time. The app lets you mark a delivery as no answer after a couple of minutes, but I always felt weird about that, especially with hot food, so I waited maybe another 30 seconds. Then the door opened. Not all the way, just about 8 or 9 inches. There was no light on inside, which I thought was odd, but whatever. Some people live in dim houses. The person who opened it was a man, maybe mid-50s, gray at the temples, wearing a dark shirt. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. I held up the bag, DoorDash delivery for, and I said the customer's name. He stared at the bag for a second. Then he looked back up at me and said, very flatly, "We didn't order anything." I apologized, said there must be a mix-up, checked the app again right there on the porch. 414 Delmar Street. I was at 414 Delmar Street. I showed him my phone screen, kind of reflexively, the way you do when you're flustered. He looked at my phone, and then he did something that still bothers me. He leaned forward, just slightly, maybe 2 inches, and he looked at the screen much longer than he needed to. He wasn't reading the address. The address was 4 characters. He was looking at something else. My other notifications, my name, I don't know. He straightened up and said, "You want 414 Delmar Avenue. That's 3 blocks east." I thanked him, walked back to my car, and drove the 3 blocks east, delivered the food, got a $2 tip, called it a night. I was almost home when something snagged in my brain and wouldn't let go. He'd been standing in a completely dark house. At 11:30 at night, in a dark shirt, and he'd opened the door in under 10 seconds like he'd been standing right behind it. I don't know how to explain why that bothered me so much. People stay up late. People stand in their own kitchens. There's nothing technically wrong with any of that, but then I thought about the way he leaned into my phone screen, and I thought about the fact that he knew, immediately, no hesitation, that Delmar Avenue was 3 blocks east. Not "I think it's that way," not pulling out his own phone, just stated it, flat, certain, like he already knew exactly where someone going to Delmar Avenue would have parked their car if they came to his door by mistake. I looked him up the next day, not in a creepy way, just the name on the property records for 414 Delmar Street is publicly listed. I don't know what I expected to find. Nothing came up that explained anything. What I do know is that I never took another order on that street, and for about 2 weeks after, every time I was sitting in my car in a parking lot waiting on the next ping, I kept checking my mirrors more than usual. Probably nothing. Almost certainly nothing. But something about the way he looked at my phone. I just couldn't shake it. Story 2. He waved back. I need to preface this by saying, I am not someone who scares easily. I grew up in a rural area. I've spent nights alone in the woods. I've done all the things that are supposed to desensitize you to the dark. I'm telling you that because I want you to understand that what I'm about to describe genuinely rattled me, and I've spent a long time trying to logic my way out of it, and I just can't. This was the summer I was 19. I was staying at my parents' house for about 6 weeks, between my freshman and sophomore years of college. Their house sits on about 2 acres, partially wooded in the back, and the nearest neighbor is maybe a quarter mile down the road. It's the kind of property where you can stand on the back porch at night and see absolutely nothing beyond the tree line, just black. My younger brother, Caleb, he was 15 at the time, had this habit of leaving his bedroom light on all night. Not because he was scared of the dark, just because he'd fall asleep reading or playing games and never bother to turn it off. His room was on the second floor, corner of the house, with one window facing the backyard and one facing the side yard. You could see that light from pretty much anywhere on the property. The thing I did that summer, almost every night, was take our dog out around midnight. We had a Bernese mountain dog named Hatch, big, slow, completely useless as a guard dog, but great company. I let him wander the yard on a long lead while I stood on the back porch and just kind of decompressed from whatever I'd been doing. One night, I guess it was around 12:40 a.m., I was out there doing exactly that. Hatch was sniffing around near the edge of the yard where the grass meets the tree line, maybe 60 feet from where I was standing. Caleb's light was on upstairs, like always. I glanced up at his window. I don't know why. Just one of those idle things your eyes do, and I saw his silhouette. He was standing at the window, looking out toward the backyard. I waved at him. Just a lazy, one-handed wave. The kind you give someone when you don't really need to, but you're in a good mood. The silhouette waved back. I smiled and looked back down at Hatch. It took me about 4 seconds to feel it. That creeping, spreading wrongness. I looked back up at the window. The silhouette was still there. Still standing. Still looking out. I want to be precise about what bothered me, because it wasn't the waving. It was the shape of the wave. When I waved, I raised my right hand, sort of a lazy side-to-side motion. What I got back was a slower wave, a deliberate one, with the wrong hand, and something about the proportions of the silhouette felt, I don't know how to describe it without sounding unhinged, slightly off. Not dramatically, not movie monster off, just slightly too wide in the shoulders, standing slightly too close to the glass. I called Caleb's cell from the porch, standing completely still, not taking my eyes off the window. He answered on the third ring, groggy, clearly woken up from sleep. "Where are you right now?" I asked him. He said, "In bed. Why?" I asked him if he'd gotten up in the last few minutes. He said no. I looked at the window. The silhouette was gone. I got Hatch inside in about 10 seconds flat, locked the back door, stood in the kitchen, and did not move for a solid 2 minutes. My brain was cycling through every rational explanation it could manufacture. A reflection. A curtain. My own eyes doing something weird in the dark. I genuinely wanted any of those to be true. I woke my dad up. He grabbed a flashlight and we walked the perimeter of the house. Nothing on the ground below Caleb's window. No footprints that we could identify, though the grass was dry, so that didn't mean much. Nothing in the tree line that we could see. My dad is practical to a fault, and his conclusion was that I'd seen my own reflection or a shadow from a passing car. I didn't argue with him. But there are no passing cars on that road at 12:40 a.m., and I know what my own wave looks like. We never found an explanation. Nothing happened after that. No break-in, no signs of anyone on the property, nothing missing. Whatever it was, if it was anything, it didn't come back. Or at least we never knew about it if it did. But I will tell you that for the rest of that summer, I did not take Hatch out past 10 o'clock. And I never once looked up at that window again at night. Some things you just decide you'd rather not confirm. Story 3. The night audit log. I worked the night audit shift at a mid-range hotel for about 14 months. Not a big chain. One of those independently owned places with like 87 rooms. A breakfast area that smelled like burnt coffee by 6 a.m. and a parking lot that was just slightly too dark no matter how many times maintenance said they'd fix the lights. The shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I took it because it paid an extra $1.75 per hour and because I am, genuinely, a night person. I liked the quiet. I liked having the lobby to myself. For the most part, nothing interesting happens on night audit. You run the end of day reports, reconcile the accounts, check in the occasional late arrival, and spend a lot of time watching whatever is on the lobby TV with the volume turned almost all the way down. It is deeply, profoundly uneventful. That's what I liked about it. This happened on a Thursday night in early February. about 8 months into the job. We had maybe 34 rooms occupied. Low for us, it was off season. By 2 a.m. the lobby had been dead for over an hour. I'd finished the audit reports early and was just sitting behind the desk eating a granola bar and reading something on my phone. The front door is automatic. It slides open when someone steps on the sensor pad outside. When it opens, there's a specific sound, the mechanical slide, then a brief rush of cold air, then the slide again as it closes. You hear it enough times and it just becomes background noise. You stop consciously registering it at 2:17 a.m. I heard the door open. I looked up, nobody there. The lobby was empty. I figured it was the sensor misfiring, wind, a stray cat, whatever. It had happened before. I looked back down at my phone. At 2:19 a.m. the door opened again. I looked up again. Empty. Now I was paying attention. I watched the door for maybe 3 minutes. Nothing. I pulled up the exterior camera feed on the desk monitor. We had one camera covering the front entrance and one covering the parking lot. The entrance camera showed the sidewalk and the sensors pad. Empty. Parking lot camera showed 2 cars, both belonging to guests I'd already checked in, and nothing else. I told myself the sensor needed recalibrating and went back to my phone. At 2:31 a.m., the door opened a third time. I looked up immediately. Still empty. But this time I noticed something. The lobby has this long mirror along the left wall. Decorative, original to the building, slightly yellowed at the edges. From where I sat behind the desk, it reflected the seating area near the door at an angle I couldn't see directly. There was someone sitting in one of the chairs, not standing. Sitting. Relaxed, almost. Leaning back slightly, legs extended. Wearing dark clothing. I couldn't make out a face clearly because of the mirror's angle and the yellowing, but I could see the outline well enough to know it was a person. I did not move for a long moment. Here is the thing about being alone in a building at 2:30 in the morning and seeing something you can't explain. Your brain does not go to helpful places. I remember very distinctly thinking that I did not want to look directly at the seating area. Like if I didn't look directly at it, the situation would remain manageable. I picked up the desk phone and called our security extension. We had one overnight security guard, a retired guy named Philip, who was in his mid-60s and took the job seriously. He answered on the second ring. I told him quietly that I thought someone was in the lobby who hadn't checked in and asked if he could come to the front desk. While I waited, I kept watching the mirror. The figure hadn't moved. Philip came through the side door about 90 seconds later. I nodded toward the seating area without saying anything. He walked over, looked around, turned back to me and shook his head slightly. Nothing there. I looked at the mirror. The chair was empty. We checked every corner of the lobby, the breakfast area, the small business alcove near the elevator. Nothing. Philip walked to the first floor hallway. Nothing. We pulled up the full camera archive for the door sensor triggers at 2:17, 2:19, and 2:31. The exterior camera showed nothing at any of those times. No person, no animal, no debris blowing across the sensor. And that should have been the end of it, except for one thing. When I went back and looked at the interior lobby camera, the one covering the desk and the seating area, there was a 4-minute gap in the recording. Timestamp from 2:28 to 2:32 a.m., not corrupted footage, not static, just missing. Like those 4 minutes had been cleanly removed. Philip said it was probably a system glitch. The camera system was old. It happens sometimes, apparently. I worked that shift for another 6 months before I transferred to a different property. I never saw anything like it again. I also never once sat with my back to that mirror again, and I always made sure I knew exactly where both exits were before the clock hit 2 a.m.